My name is Ethan Morales, 29 years old, and I'd never imagined my life would come to this tiptoeing out of my own childhood home like a fugitive in the middle of the night, my car packed to the brim, heart-racing hands trembling. This isn't where I thought I'd be at nearly 30. I'm a junior architect at a decent firm in Seattle, a quiet guy who kept his head down, paid his bills, and tried desperately to be a good son. I lived at home mostly out of practicality, affordable rent, short commute, and after my mom's health scare 2 years ago, I thought it made sense to stay close. But my parents didn't see me as their grown son, they saw me as a wallet. It all began spiraling when my older sister Sophia moved back in after another failed artisanal soap business. She arrived with her boyfriend Leon, their 2 noisy kids, and their golden retriever Archie. Within a week, the house transformed from a peaceful sanctuary to a chaotic daycare center and kennel. The deal was supposed to be temporary just until they got back on their feet, my mother insisted. But weeks became months, and before I knew it, Sophia and Leon were sprawled across the living room every evening binge-watching reality TV, while Archie shredded my running shoes. The tipping point. My mother sat me down on a rainy Tuesday evening. "Ethan, we need you to contribute a little more this month," she said, gently stirring her tea with a clinking spoon. "Groceries and utilities have gone up, with the kids and all." "How much more?" I asked cautiously. "Just another $400 just until Sophia gets settled." My stomach turned. I was already paying $500 a month more than fair for a small bedroom in a house that was no longer mine. Mom, Sophia, and Leon aren't paying anything. "They're family," she said, her voice tightening. "Family helps family." That phrase again used as both a plea and a weapon. I stayed silent, suppressing the surge of resentment. That night, I overheard Sophia laughing with Leon in the kitchen. "Ethan'll cave. He always does. He's too soft to say no." Soft, numb, just exhausted. It wasn't just the money. The physical space I used to call my own had vanished. My work-from-home setup had been dismantled, so Sophia's kids could use the guest room as their playroom. I was relegated to a corner of my own bedroom juggling architectural drawings while Archie barked and the kids screamed outside my door. And through all of this, my father Arturo, a stern ex-cop, just shrugged. "It's tough times, son. We all pitch in." Except some of us were pitching in far more than others. What truly pushed me over the edge was discovering that Sophia and Leon had rummaged through my closet, helping themselves to my hiking gear for a weekend trip they never invited me on. I found muddy boots dumped outside my door, my expensive camping stove dented and filthy. I confronted them. "Did you take my gear without asking?" Sophia waved it off. "Relax, you weren't using it." "It's mine," I said sharply, for once not backing down. "Ask next time." Leon smirked. "Why are you so uptight, man? You live with your parents. You should be grateful you have somewhere to stay." Somewhere to stay, I was paying nearly market rate for a crammed bedroom in a house overrun by freeloaders, and I should be grateful. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, spiraling through arguments I wished I'd had, things I wished I'd said. At 2 a.m., I texted an old college friend, Carter, who I hadn't seen much since graduation. "Hey, weird question. Any chance you know anyone looking for a roommate? Need out ASAP." Carter replied almost immediately. "Bro, timing's wild. My roommate just gave notice, moving in with his girlfriend. Want to come check it out tomorrow?" It felt like fate. Like the universe was tossing me a lifeline. I spent the next few days methodically preparing. I packed little by little, slipping out extra boxes to my car during lunch breaks, clearing out my savings account, and setting up new banking passwords so no one could guilt or trick me into helping the family again. I played the part perfectly at dinner, nodding at my father's jokes, complimenting my mother's cooking, all the while knowing I was almost free. And then finally came my exit. At 4:30 a.m., I crept through the house, careful not to wake anyone. Archie stirred, but didn't bark. I swear even the dog had stopped caring. When I closed the front door for the last time, I felt both terrified and weightless. It wasn't dramatic, not yet, but I knew the fallout would come. And it did. By 9 a.m., my phone was exploding. "Where are you? Why is your room empty?" My mother's text read. "Call me now. This isn't how family behaves." Sophia's message, "Wow, real mature, Ethan. Running away when we need you most." Leon added, "Guess we know who the selfish one is." My father left a voicemail I didn't even listen to. I sat on Carter's couch staring at my phone and did something I'd never dared before. I turned it off. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, even if it wasn't my house anymore. The silence that followed turning off my phone felt strange at first, like a radio that had been blasting static suddenly cut to dead air. I sat there on Carter's worn-out couch in his loft apartment, my duffel bag at my feet, a half-empty coffee mug in my hand staring out the window at Seattle's gray drizzle. My chest felt tight, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. "You good?" Carter asked, nudging my leg with his foot. I hadn't realized I'd zoned out completely. "Yeah," I lied, offering a small smile. He studied me for a moment and then nodded. "We'll head out later and grab some groceries. You're here now, man. Fresh start." Fresh start. I liked the sound of that, even if part of me felt a gnawing guilt creeping in around the edges. Years of being the responsible one didn't just evaporate overnight. I could practically hear my mother's voice accusing me of abandoning the family. Still, guilt wasn't enough to drag me back to that madhouse. By the third day, the calls stopped, but the texts kept coming, evolving from angry demands to desperate pleas. My mother's last message simply read, "We need you, Ethan. Sophia's having a tough time and your father's worried sick. Please come home. Just talk to us." It didn't surprise me that the entire family's survival apparently hinged on me paying inflated rent, while Sophia and Leon contributed nothing but chaos. In my head, I rehearsed what I'd say if I replied. I imagined calmly explaining why I left, how unfair it was to expect me to subsidize their freeloading lifestyle, how my mental health had deteriorated because I was constantly made to feel like an ATM rather than a son. But each time I drafted a response, I deleted it. What was the point? They wouldn't listen. They never had. Carter had an easy way of distracting me. He took me around the city, introducing me to his friends, showing me the quieter spots of Seattle I'd never explored, even after living here my whole life. There was a tiny bookstore down an alleyway where the owner made everyone tea, a cafe that served the best cinnamon rolls I'd ever tasted, a secondhand furniture shop where I picked out a sturdy old drafting table for the corner of my new room. For the first time, I was building a life that belonged solely to me. No compromise. No helping out at the expense of my own sanity. But freedom had its own costs. Even though I could technically afford this apartment, it meant tightening my budget. The dream of saving up to start my own architecture studio felt more distant, now postponed indefinitely. And just as I was settling into a routine, a familiar name appeared in my inbox at work: Ava. Ava was a former colleague, a sharp, funny project manager I'd always admired but had never gotten to know well. Her message was brief but surprising. "Hey, Ethan. Word is you moved out. Hope you're okay. Would you like to grab a drink sometime?" No agenda. Just checking in. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sure," I replied. "How about tomorrow?" We met at a low-key bar near the waterfront. Ava arrived wearing a navy pea coat and that easy smile I remembered from work. As soon as we sat down, she cut straight to it. "So, what happened?" Her tone was light, but genuine. I told her everything. No embellishments, just the unvarnished truth about Sophia. The freeloading, the pressure, my parents' favoritism, the guilt trips, and finally the decision to walk away. She listened without interruption, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "That's a lot," she finally said when I finished. "But honestly, good for you. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but you made the right call." Then she leaned in a little and lowered her voice. "You're not the only one with family drama, by the way. I get it. Sometimes you have to walk away so you can breathe again." That evening became a turning point, not just because Ava understood, but because she offered something I hadn't expected: clarity. "You've spent years waiting for your family to recognize your value," she said. "But they won't. Not because you're not valuable, but because you make their lives easier exactly as they are. If you stay, nothing will change." Her words hit hard, but they felt like freedom. That conversation stayed with me over the next few days as I set up my new drafting table, unpacked the last box, and settled into Carter's apartment as my real home. But freedom is rarely that simple. Exactly 1 week after I moved out, my mother showed up at my office unannounced. I was sitting at my desk, headphones on, deep in drafting revisions, when I felt someone standing too close. I looked up, and there she was. Hair perfectly styled, pearl earrings, trench coat spotless despite the rain. "We need to talk," she said softly. I froze. My coworkers looked up curiously as I stood. "Mom," I muttered, pulling her aside. "What are you doing here?" Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was composed. "We're falling apart without you, Ethan." Sophia's overwhelmed. "Your father isn't sleeping." I'm sorry for how things have been. Please come home, just for dinner." One dinner. It sounded so reasonable. But reasonable requests were their specialty, a foot in the door to pull me back into old patterns. I hesitated long enough for her to sense my doubt. "Please," she whispered, reaching for my hand. And then I remembered Ava's words. I remembered Sophia laughing about how I always caved. I remembered Leon smirking at me in my own house. I stepped back. "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Not this time." Her face crumpled just a little, but she nodded and left without another word. As she walked away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The sadness of closing a chapter, but the relief of finally writing my own story. Back at my desk, I took a deep breath, refocused on my screen, and realized something. This wasn't just a fresh start. This was the beginning of a life where I chose who got to be in it. No more guilt, no more obligation masquerading as love. Just me finally free. Days passed after my mother's surprise visit, but her presence lingered in my mind like the scent of her perfume on my jacket. I told myself I'd moved on, that I was finally free. But sometimes late at night, that old ache crept back in. The ache of wanting approval, of wishing things could have been different, of wondering if I'd done the right thing. But as soon as I started spiraling, I reminded myself how suffocating it had been living there, how exhausting it was to be the reliable one while Sophia and Leon coasted. This was my life now, my choices, my rules. Work became an anchor during this transition. My supervisor, Laura, began trusting me with larger projects. One morning, she handed me a design for a boutique hotel near Pike Place Market and said, "I want you to take point on this, Ethan. Think you're ready?" For the first time in months, I felt excited again. I dove into the project, spending long hours sketching, drafting, reworking designs, until I felt they matched not just the client's brief, but also my own aesthetic vision. The freedom I had outside the office was starting to spill into my work, and people noticed. Even Carter teased me one evening, saying, "You're practically glowing these days, man. New chapter's looking good on you." Ava and I kept meeting for drinks walks and coffee runs. What began as casual check-ins became something warmer, more natural. We could talk for hours without effort, and she somehow understood the parts of my story I didn't know how to explain. She never asked too many questions, but when she did, they were thoughtful. "Do you think you'll ever speak to them again?" she asked one evening as we watched the ferries come and go under a cotton candy sunset. I thought about that for a long moment. Maybe I finally said, but it would have to be on my terms this time. And right now, I don't trust them enough for that. She nodded like she'd already known my answer. "That's fair. Boundaries, Ethan. You're finally setting them. That's growth. But family has a way of testing your resolve just when you think you've reclaimed it." The next blow came not from a call or a text, but from a lawyer's letter. A slim, white envelope waited for me one evening when I got back to Carter's apartment. No return address, just my name printed carefully on the front. Inside was a letter from my father's longtime attorney, polite but formal. They were revisiting household contributions and seeking reimbursement for shared living expenses during my tenancy, citing an itemized list that included utilities, repairs, and even wear and tear on common spaces. It totaled almost $5,000. My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't just a request, it was a legal demand. They were trying to recast my years of rent payments, chores, and sacrifice as a debt. I felt rage bubble up, but also something else, clarity. I took a slow breath and reread the letter. They hadn't learned anything. They weren't sorry. This wasn't about family. This was about control. The letter was their way of pulling me back in, of saying, you can't just leave. You owe us. That evening, I called Ava. I could barely get the words out at first, but she didn't rush me. Okay, she said calmly. First thing, don't panic. You're not going to answer this alone. My cousin's a lawyer, a really good one. I'll introduce you. He'll tell you exactly what this is and what you need to do. Her steady confidence calmed me in a way nothing else could have. The next morning, I met her cousin Eric at a coffee shop near the courthouse. He flipped through the letter, smirked, and said, "This is nonsense. They're bluffing. They have no legal basis to demand this. Your rent payments alone exceeded what most landlords would charge. And unless you signed a contract agreeing to reimburse every bill and repair retroactively, which I assume you didn't, this is just a scare tactic." Relief flooded me, but was quickly replaced by anger. "So they're just trying to intimidate me?" I asked. Eric nodded. "Exactly. My advice? Ignore this unless they escalate formally, if they do call me immediately. But honestly, I doubt they will. This letter was meant to rattle you, and it had. But no more." That night, I sat at my drafting table with a blank sketch pad, letting my thoughts settle as I drew lines and shapes without thinking. My hand moved automatically while my mind worked through the emotions. They weren't going to stop. I knew that now. Even from a distance, my family would find ways to pull at me, guilt me, or intimidate me. I needed to do something different, not just keep reacting, but proactively decide who I wanted to be and what life I wanted. And so I made a quiet promise to myself I would stop waiting for their approval. I would stop explaining myself. I would stop rehearsing conversations that would never go how I imagined. They could live their lives however they wanted. But I was done playing the role they had written for me. A few days later, Laura pulled me aside at work. "The boutique hotel client loved your concept, Ethan. They want to greenlight the project. I'm promoting you to lead designer on this." Congratulations. It felt like the universe was responding to my resolve, rewarding me for finally stepping fully into my own life. I smiled, thanked her, and walked back to my desk with a sense of quiet pride. Not pride that needed to be displayed or announced, but the kind that settled deep inside and made everything else feel lighter. As I left the office that evening, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. Another message from Sophia sat at the top of my inbox unread. I didn't even bother to open it. Instead, I slid the phone into my pocket, turned toward the waterfront, and let the cold breeze wash over me. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. The days after my promotion blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known before, a life fully untethered from my family, defined by my own terms, built on small, steady victories. Each morning, I walked to the office with purpose, my mind clear, no longer weighed down by the constant mental calculations of what my parents or Sophia might demand next. Work no longer felt like an escape. It felt like home. My designs for the boutique hotel began gaining attention even outside the office. Carter, ever the cheerleader, called it my glow-up era, joking that even my posture had improved since I moved out. "You're walking like you finally own your life," he teased one evening over takeout. Maybe I did. I was finally living for myself, but that didn't mean the past let go so easily. Late one afternoon, Ava met me for coffee. We had settled into a comfortable rhythm of friendship that hovered in a space between platonic and something else, and I liked it exactly as it was, simple, warm, honest. She tapped her cup lightly and asked, "Have you heard from them again?" I hesitated for a second before admitting Sophia sent another message last night. Said Dad's health is declining, claimed the stress of me leaving is why. Ava's expression softened, but she didn't rush to console me. "Do you believe that?" she asked gently. I thought about it. My father had always been strong, a man who prided himself on showing no weakness, but the weight of family tension took its toll on everyone, eventually. I don't know, I said honestly, but I also know how they twist narratives. I can't tell what's true anymore. Ava nodded, sipping her drink thoughtfully. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can care and still keep your distance. Her words settled in my chest like an anchor steadying me as I navigated the murky waters of guilt and freedom. That night, lying in bed at Carter's place, I thought about what she said. I didn't have to become cold or disconnected to protect myself. I could hold compassion without offering myself up as a sacrifice. The next morning, I sent a brief message to my mother. I'm sorry to hear Dad isn't well. I hope he takes care of himself. I won't be coming home, but I wish him better health. No explanations, no invitations, just enough to show decency but keep my boundary firm. Her reply was immediate and predictable. He wouldn't be sick if you hadn't left, but suit yourself. That was all I needed to know. They hadn't changed, and likely never would. A week later, I found myself standing before the nearly finished model of the boutique hotel, running my fingers over the delicate materials, feeling a quiet pride at what I was building. Laura walked by and paused. Clients flying in next week to meet the team, she said. They asked to meet the lead designer personally. Be ready. My heart raced, but not with fear, with excitement. For the first time in years, someone wanted to meet me for who I was, not because of an obligation or family history, but because of my work, my merit. Meanwhile, Carter had his own news. He was moving out following a new job in Portland. You can keep the lease if you want, he offered one evening as we packed boxes together. I thought about it and realized I didn't need time to decide. Yeah, I said. I want it. I'm ready to have my own space. Signing that lease under my own name felt symbolic, like planting a flag on this new chapter. A home of my choosing, funded entirely by my work, free of compromise. But just as everything was settling into place, the next curveball arrived. Sophia herself showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call, just a knock at the door late on a Friday night. I opened it to find her standing there in a rain-soaked coat, hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed but sharp. I need to talk, she said, pushing past me before I could answer. The smell of damp wool filled the entryway as she dropped her purse on my floor. They're falling apart without you, Ethan, she began without preamble. Leon's gone. Mom cries every night. Dad won't admit it, but he misses you. I'm trying to hold it together, but... She trailed off, glancing around at my neat, modest living space. You've got it all together now, huh? There was an edge to her voice, half resentment, half envy. I stayed silent, waiting for her to say what she'd really come to say. Finally, she blurted, "Come back, just for a while. We need you." I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly, and replied with more calm than I felt. You don't need me. You need what I provided. There's a difference. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but didn't argue. Instead, she sank into the armchair across from me, burying her face in her hands. I thought if I could make you feel guilty enough, you'd fix everything like you always did, she admitted quietly. I'm tired, Ethan. They've leaned on me since you left, and I'm drowning too. Hearing that was strange, a glimpse of vulnerability I'd never expected from Sophia. For years, she'd been the golden child, the one our parents exalted, the one who could do no wrong. Now here she was, cracked and fraying at the edges. I can't come back, I said softly. But that doesn't mean you can't step away too. She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. If I leave, they'll fall apart completely. I held her gaze and replied, maybe they need to. It was the truth I had learned the hard way. Sometimes people need to hit the bottom before they can begin to change, and sometimes they never do. I wasn't responsible for their bottom. I was only responsible for myself. Sophia stayed a while longer, speaking in hushed tones about her regrets, her fears, the ways our parents had shaped her too. But by the end of the night, she rose, thanked me quietly, and left without asking again. When the door closed behind her, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. A quiet peace, the kind that comes not from winning, but from knowing you've finally stopped fighting battles that were never yours to fight. In the days after Sophia's visit, the house felt quieter than ever. Even though Carter was still around for another week before his move to Portland, something had shifted in me. That night with Sophia had closed a chapter I hadn't even realized was still open. She didn't leave angry. She didn't try to manipulate me further. She simply left, and for the first time, I believed she truly understood. I didn't hear from her again, not immediately at least. And my parents? Silence. The constant barrage of messages had stopped entirely, as if my refusal to return had finally sunk in. But that silence wasn't unsettling. It felt earned. It felt like a breath I'd been holding for years had finally been released. The work on the boutique hotel project reached a fever pitch as the client's visit approached. Every detail mattered: lighting angles, material, textures, sightlines, even the feeling a guest might have when they first stepped into the lobby. And I cared deeply about all of it. My focus sharpened in ways I hadn't expected. It was as if removing the emotional clutter from my life had cleared a path to real creativity. Laura noticed too, stopping by my desk one afternoon just as I finished a revised elevation drawing. "Your work's never looked stronger," she said, almost offhand but with warmth. "You're leading this project beautifully." A simple sentence, but it meant the world to me. Ava and I kept seeing each other, but things had shifted there too. No labels, no pressure, but a deeper closeness was growing between us. She didn't press when I talked about my family, but listened carefully whenever I chose to share. She celebrated my promotion like it was her own win, and quietly encouraged me whenever self-doubt crept back in. I was building something solid with her, something honest and mutual, and I didn't need it to be defined yet. It was enough that it felt easy. Just when I thought I was finally free from the gravitational pull of my family's dysfunction, another message came, but not from them. It was from Paul, my cousin. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a quiet figure at family gatherings who'd always stayed on the sidelines observing more than participating. His text was simple, but caught me off guard. "Hey, Ethan, I know things have been rough. Thought you should know your dad's talking about selling the house. You probably don't care, but figured you might want a heads up." For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Sell the house. The same house that had felt like a prison to me for years. My childhood bedroom, the walls where I'd felt invisible suffocated. It should have meant nothing. It wasn't mine anymore. I had left. But a strange emotion rose anyway, a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. I texted Paul back. "Thanks for telling me. Are you close with them these days?" His reply was quick and candid. "Not really. I just drop by once in a while. To be honest, it's a mess over there. Place is falling apart physically too. Guess your rent money did more than anyone thought." That last line struck harder than it should have. Even outsiders saw it clearly. I had been propping up that whole house without realizing it. I sat with that truth for a long time, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out the window at the city lights. Then a thought crept in, one I hadn't expected. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe the house being sold was exactly what everyone needed. My parents would finally have to confront their own reality instead of leaning on me to cushion it. And maybe Sophia would finally find her own independence too, if she hadn't already. I didn't need to intervene. I didn't need to offer help. I just needed to let it happen. Later that evening, I told Ava about Paul's message. She tilted her head thoughtfully before saying, "That house was never really home for you, was it?" I smiled faintly. "No, not really. Just walls, just a roof." She placed her hand gently over mine. "Then it's okay to let it go." And I realized she was right. The house wasn't an anchor anymore. It wasn't even a symbol. It was just a building that had once contained a version of me I no longer recognized. Work continued to flourish. The boutique hotel client came to town, and when I walked them through the model and renderings, they nodded appreciatively, asking thoughtful questions. At the end of the meeting, the CEO of their company shook my hand firmly and said, "You've got a good eye, Ethan. We're excited to see this through with you." That handshake meant more to me than all the hollow praise I'd ever received from my father. It wasn't familial obligation or forced politeness. It was recognition earned purely on merit, and that mattered deeply. But life doesn't let go of old threads that easily. A few days after that meeting, Sophia reached out again. This time, it was different. Her message was short, almost tentative. "I found an apartment. Small, but it's mine. I don't expect anything from you. I just thought you'd want to know. Thank you for saying what you said." Reading those words brought a tightness to my throat I hadn't expected. Not regret, something softer. A quiet pride, maybe. She was finding her own way now, finally. Just like me. For the first time in our lives, we were both standing on our own. I didn't reply right away. I didn't need to. Some things didn't require an immediate response. Some things simply needed time to breathe. Instead, I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and stepped outside into the crisp evening air, letting the breeze wash over me. I felt lighter, calmer, and for once, fully present. The path forward was clearer than ever. I wasn't walking away from family anymore. I was walking toward myself. Weeks passed, and spring settled over Seattle, softening the edges of everything. The air smelled different, fresher, lighter. Even the streets felt quieter, or maybe that was just me finally listening differently. Work hummed along at a pace I could handle. The boutique hotel project entered construction, and my team trusted me without question now, like I'd stepped fully into a role that had always been waiting for me. Ava and I continued our quiet rhythm, too, walking, talking, sharing silences that felt comfortable instead of awkward. We didn't label what we were building, and that was fine. For once in my life, I didn't need a label to prove something was real. The absence of conflict with my family didn't mean their influence had disappeared completely, though. Every so often, memories surfaced: my father's sharp voice, my mother's disappointed sighs, Sophia's smug laughter when we were younger. But they held less power now. They felt like echoes, distant and fading. And then almost 3 months after I'd left, it happened. I got an invitation. Not a call, not a text, but a formal envelope slipped under my apartment door, hand-addressed in my mother's careful script. "You are invited," it read, "to a family dinner at Sophia's new apartment. No expectations, no obligations, just dinner." My first instinct was skepticism. It felt too carefully worded, too polished. But as I held the card in my hands, another thought crept in. Maybe this was Sophia's way of offering peace, not obligation. The words "no expectations" felt intentional. I sat with that thought for 2 days before deciding to go. Not because I owed them anything, but because it felt like closure for me. The evening arrived clear and cool. I wore a simple jacket, no tie, no need for formality. When I reached Sophia's apartment building, a modest but tidy place in a quiet neighborhood, I hesitated at the entrance for a breath before buzzing up. Her voice crackled through the intercom light, but genuine, "Come on up, Ethan." Inside her space surprised me. Small but warm, sparse but thoughtful. It didn't feel like an extension of our parents' house. It felt like hers. She met me at the door with a nervous smile. No grand gestures, no scripted apology, just, "Thanks for coming." I nodded, stepping inside, noticing immediately that our parents were already seated at the small dining table. My father looked older, somehow less imposing, almost deflated. My mother looked the same, but quieter. The room felt charged, but not hostile. As I sat down, Sophia broke the silence first. "We're not here to talk about the past," she said, simply glancing at me, but also at them. "I invited you because I wanted to show you that I'm okay. I'm handling things now. I just thought you should know that." Her words felt different this time. Not manipulative, not pleading, just honest. My father cleared his throat. "I was angry," he said, his voice rough but subdued. "I still am in some ways. But I can see you needed space. I didn't understand that before." He didn't apologize outright, and I didn't expect him to, but the fact that he acknowledged any of this at all was more than I'd anticipated. My mother added softly, "It's quieter now, harder, but we're managing. We don't expect you to fix it anymore." Those words lifted a weight I didn't realize was still sitting on my chest. Dinner was simple. Homemade lasagna salad, a bottle of wine that Sophia opened with slightly shaking hands. Conversation stayed light, nothing deep, no probing questions. When I complimented Sophia on her place, she smiled with something that almost resembled pride. It was strange seeing them like this, smaller, more human, less invincible. Not saints, not villains, just people trying to figure things out late in the game. As the evening wound down, my father surprised me again. "You're doing well," he said, looking me in the eye for the first time in what felt like years. "Laura told me about your project. That's impressive work." It was the closest he'd ever come to praise that felt sincere. I accepted it with a simple nod, no sarcasm, no bitterness. Ava's words echoed in my mind, "You can care and still keep your distance." I cared in that moment, but I didn't feel pulled back into the old patterns. When I left that night, I didn't feel manipulated or guilty or obligated. I felt at peace. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. The fractures were still there, the years of imbalance and misunderstanding couldn't be erased by one dinner. But something had shifted. The dynamic had changed. I had changed. Back at my apartment, I stood by the window for a long time watching the lights of the city flicker and dance below. I thought about all the ways my life had evolved since I left that house. I'd built something steady and strong, not just my career or my apartment, but my sense of self. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee the same way I always did, but this time it tasted better somehow. The sun poured through the window in soft gold light, and I realized I was exactly where I was meant to be, not just physically, but emotionally too. Sophia sent me a message later that day. "Thanks again for coming. No pressure to do it again soon. Just wanted you to know you're welcome anytime." I smiled reading it. It wasn't a demand, just an open door, and the key to that door was now entirely mine to use or not. I didn't feel any rush to reply. I had time, I had space, I had freedom. That was the true ending I realized, not cutting ties or burning bridges, but choosing every day how and when and whether to cross them. I didn't have to declare independence anymore. I was living it. Story 2. I discovered that my stepson had transferred $90,000 to his true father's name. As a result, I observed the shop collapse and frozen the accounts. Hi there. We're putting a lot of effort into reaching our first 1,000 subscribers. Click the subscribe button if you enjoy real, heartfelt stories. You won't realize how much it helps. Let's begin the narrative now. A client questioned me directly. "Is your son's real dad here?" as I stood in the center of the business that I had helped construct from the bottom up. Something broke in my chest at that instant. It was his manner of asking the question, not the subject itself. Like he knew something I didn't. Allow me to explain. My name is Mike. As a 47-year-old, I would have told you that I had a strong stepson, a thriving family company, and a wonderful marriage until 3 weeks ago. After 12 years together, my wife Dana and I were proud of her. When I met Jordan, her kid, he was 10 years old. Clever, shy, and skinny child who has a major love with YouTube business channels and shoes. The ghost of his biological father. Never present. Never made a child support payment. Never made a birthday call. I attended football games and filled in the blanks. Taught him how to drive and assisted him with his schoolwork. I wasn't attempting to be a substitute. I simply adored the child as if he were my own. Let's go back to last year. Jordan becomes really excited about starting a shoe resale shop on his 21st birthday. And look, he labored for this one, even though I know most 21-year-olds have stupid notions. Completed the research grant spreadsheets and presented his presentation to me as though I were an investor on Shark Tank. If I fail, at least I'll fail, he added, looking me in the eye. Being aware that you had faith in me. That statement really got to me. I threw myself into it. Dana was a co-signer. To secure the lease, I made the first $20K investment. 40 more for the inventory after that. By the time of the big opening, I had spent about $90,000 of my personal funds. Funds for retirement have increased again. Cash for emergencies is gone. I didn't give a damn. It was for the family. Jordan referred to it as our dream. He stated that he also wanted me to feel as though I had made something, and it felt right for a while. He managed social media and got up early every morning, fulfilled all the duties expected of a young business owner. He was well liked by the customers, even had a feature that day in a local online magazine. The one with the client began similarly to the others. I was delivering a fresh shipment of limited edition Jordans that I had assisted in locating via a former client. While I'm behind the counter, a man in his 30s enters and asks, "Oh, hey, is your son's real dad here?" I froze at the place's owner. He spoke in a casual manner as if he didn't want to offend me, yet there was a familiar, assured tone to his voice, as if he had met him. I dismissed it with a joke, gave the man his footwear, and went to my car. But I couldn't get that sentence out of my brain. I asked Jordan who else had been visiting the store during supper that evening. For half a second, his gaze shifted to Dana. Just a flick. However, I managed to catch it. "Just people from around you know some old friends of Mom's?" He shrugged. He refused to look into my eyes, and I sensed it instantly. That change in the atmosphere. Only when something is about to fall apart do you sense it. I also began to notice other things. Jordan ceased to show me the money, claimed to have things under control. New inventory invoices are no longer emailed. When I questioned Dana about the business, she became very defensive. One night she remarked, "You should let him handle it. You've already accomplished enough. Keep him from becoming smothered. Smother him. He's walking on a foundation that I constructed. I invested all of my time, money, and faith in him." I was now being advised to take a step back. I nodded without saying anything. Wash the dishes and eat my meal. However, I began to question who was actually in charge of this shop, because I have a feeling it's not the child I reared. And the actual dad tells me something. It's been years since I heard anything about it. Perhaps he's closer than I realize. He's going to have to learn the hard way if that's the case. What would happen if you excluded the one man who truly created the dream? That night, I was unable to sleep. I slept next Dana and listened to her calm, steady breathing as if nothing had happened, but it was all noisy within my brain. The voice of the consumer continued reverberating. "Dad, this is real. Right here." Jordan looked at her as if she had the answers. Her lack of astonishment was evident. I began tugging at the strands. I had access to a few items such as joint documents, certain bank alerts, and past email logins, but I didn't want to get into conspiracy crazy. I looked into the company account. The password had been altered by Jordan. Strange. It's hardly a huge deal, is it? However, we decided that I would oversee the first year's finances so he could concentrate on expansion. I then looked at the LLC documents and the business license that we either submitted together or ought to have done jointly. Lost. I was officially perplexed now. The next morning, I gave our accountant a call. We've been using this man for years. Amiable, middle 60s, extremely meticulous with details. "Hey, just checking who's listed as the owner on the business license for Kick's Vault," I said. A pause occurred. "I didn't do the licensing, Mike. I thought you guys took care of things on your own. You didn't know after the initial consultation I believed you to be doing it. He paused once more before saying something that caused my neck to stand on end. 2 months ago, someone filed it, but it wasn't you. Daniel Carter is in charge of it. Daniel Carter, Dana's former partner, Jordan's father by birth. Not much of hanging up the phone comes to mind. I only recall feeling a strange mixture of humiliation and betrayal as I walked outside and sat on the back stairs. Not rage, not melancholy. Something colder, as if someone disconnected the sun from my life without even apologizing. Let me clarify. I donated $90,000 to this child, spent evenings looking for potential suppliers, assisted him in creating his complete business plan, and registered the entire enterprise in the name of the guy who had deserted him. For what purpose? For a last name. That day, I said nothing, not to Dana or to Jordan. However, I mentioned it in passing the following morning, stated that I wanted to know if the company insurance needed to be updated, was curious as to whose name was on file. Jordan stiffened. Dana let out a sigh. "You don't have to worry about that stuff," she remarked, setting down her fork. "It's resolved." When I gently inquired again, Dana gave me a direct look and stated, "Mike, you don't get it. In reality, he is not your son." There was no hesitancy or pretense. Fell into my lap like a brick. I gazed at her. I think my mouth was half open. I bided my time till she walked it back. Describe. Let's say she didn't intend it that way. She didn't. "Indeed, you've been wonderful to him," she continued. "Really? However, perhaps it's time to take a break. Now let his father get involved. He gets to be a father now he sees. Now that the job is over, the store has a built-in consumer base and product buzz." I took the chance now. Dana spoke so nonchalantly as if it were only a sensible strategy for transition, as if I were a temporary employee whose contract was over. After slowly nodding and finishing my coffee, I turned to face Jordan, who was unable to turn around. Then, without raising my voice, I said, "All well then, I will no longer be involved." I meant it too. They assumed I was simply moving aside. They were unaware that I was only getting started and that I still had control over the accounts. They believed I had left. Jordan felt a sense of relief. Dana pretended to have recently prevailed in a business custody dispute. However, neither of them understood that I was more than simply the investment. The infrastructure was me. I was in charge of the entire back end when we first began Kick's Vault. Jordan was too young to sign some forms, therefore the LLC was first officially mine. Vendors provided the inventory. He was designated as an authorized user on the company checking account that I found, which had been created in my name. The cash $90,000 that I saved myself. And I was discreetly keeping complete access while he had been busy claiming to be a CEO and receiving shout-outs on Instagram. Jordan believed that I was unaware of his rerouting, that he registered a new company in his father's name. The problem with attempting to overrule a foundation, however, is this. If the land on which you are building isn't truly yours, the entire apparatus can be brought down with a single lever. And that lever was mine. So I picked up the phone. Keep quiet. Once. I started by asking the bank if I could temporarily freeze the account and if it was still operating in my name. "You're still the primary, of course, Mr. Garrison." "Excellent." I then gave the merchant processor a call. They used this service for all payments made at the point of sale. Since it was connected to my kitchen, I only needed to click to stop them from accepting card payments. I then investigated the lease. You know what? As the original owner, I was the renter of record for the property, which was owned by Kick's Vault LLC. Everything they had been constructing. Every shoe sold, every transaction. Each employee was employed. It still passed through the home I constructed. I bided my time till Monday morning was calm. On the week's slowest sales day, I froze the accounts at 7:03 a.m. At 7:15, I stopped the merchant processing. I notified the landlord via email that I was closing because of financial irregularities. I returned home at 9 a.m. and proceeded to prepare breakfast as usual. I didn't block the door, I didn't warn them, and I didn't text. I hoped they would enter and observe what transpired. I desired for them to sample it. That fear, that loss of command, that insight that the guy they discarded like a spare component was the engine's lifeblood. At around 10:42, Dana called. Jordan 3 times after I let it ring. I maintained a level voice the 4th time I picked up. Is there a problem with the shop dead quiet? Nothing is functioning. Finally, he said, the payments have decreased. The bank accounts were shut. Not even the personnel can be paid. I feigned a moment of thought. That's odd. It's probably wise to call your biological father. It sounds like an actual owner issue. He remained silent, simply hung up. I sat there and watched the call screen's flickering light go off, and I grinned for the first time in weeks. Kid, you wanted him. You've got him. Hopefully, he will be able to unfreeze what he never constructed. Have you ever seen someone attempt to patch a leak by covering it with tape while the entire pipe beneath is rupturing? When I yanked the plug, Jordan was running about like a chicken with its head cut off. Panic on the first day. Day 2, denial. Day 3, desperation. They had no idea what had hit them by the quiet of the 4th day. Jordan strolled in on Monday looking confident, and I heard from one of the staff a wonderful youngster named Ricky who used to call me Uncle Mike when I helped him obtain the job. He claimed it was just a small technical issue. Their payment terminal was still down by lunchtime. Jordan attempted a bluff when the landlord stopped by for a haphazard inspection after their supplier, a friend of mine whom I had already warned, canceled their delivery. It was unsuccessful. It turns out that when you act like the boss, and you are unable to explain why the name on the lease does not match the name on your company license, it is rather unpleasant. Even more amusing is realizing that the person you filed against is still listed on all court documents. I was not even required to be present. I simply waited. One by one, their employees began to leave by Wednesday afternoon. Because the inventory was purchased on Net 30, the shelves were already half empty. Who do you think defaulted? I didn't ask, but Dana looked like she had been sobbing when she got home that evening. Since her brief incident, we hadn't spoken much. His speech isn't actually that of your son. At the table, she took a seat, silent as if she were preparing for something. Then she added, "Don't ruin everything, Mike. I know you're mad. He is only a child. He was wrong." I gave her a glance and remained silent for a short while, simply gazed. "Whose store is it?" I then inquired. "Dana." She winced. I repeated slowly this time. "Is it Daniel Carter's or Jordan's?" She started to say something, but I interrupted her because it was definitely not mine. I'm not his biological father. "Do you recall Quiet?" She made an effort to shift the conversation. "Claimed they would work things out. Said they would start afresh if Daniel could get a little loan to pay for it." Then I burst out laughing. Just beneath my breath, nothing loud. Because this Daniel had been going to Jordan for more than 10 years. The same man who left as soon as Dana became pregnant. The man who thought of himself as a parent by accidentally sending a text message once a year on Christmas. And he was meant to save them now. No. Jordan texted me on Thursday afternoon. Only a single line. I made a mistake. I ought to have been truthful. Not enough. It's much too late. Later that night, the store's lights went off. Literally, there is no power. The utility payment must have been overlooked by someone as well. To see it for myself, I took one more drive past. The vibrant graffiti-style sign over the door, Kick's Vault, was half lit and shattered. No one was in the windows. The dream was dead, there was no foot traffic, and all I needed to do was remove my hand from the wheel. No shouting, no threatening. A silent reset, please. Someone locks you out of your house after you give them the keys. All right. However, don't be shocked when I take back what's rightfully mine and change the locks. When people show you who they are, they say, have faith in them. But you show them the documents when they later try to guilt trip you. Dana asked if we could have a serious talk 3 days after the business closed. We had hardly spoken. I've been doing that strange, icy roommate thing where everyone is kind but stoic on the inside. I anticipated what would happen, but I responded, "Sure." At a bank, we sat across from one another like strangers. She seemed exhausted. Hair up, no makeup, and a sweatshirt that was most likely Jordan's. I no longer felt furious, simply exhausted. She began softly, expressed regret for the way things turned out, that we ought to have talked, that she ought to have handled it better. Then she gave me a classic mic hit. "You're superior than this." I gave her space to speak. Allow her to spin this as a miscommunication using every phrase she can think of. "Even I kid you not," she said. His goal was to please his true father. Boys are like that. I believe he only wished to establish a connection with him. Yes, using my funds. Jordan then arrived. An hour later, he arrived with a box of donuts and that dejected puppy smile that children make when they realize they've made a mistake but think that sugar would make it better. He didn't even immediately take a seat. He simply lingered in the kitchen before settling in. I suppose I should have anticipated this from a non-blood person. That one struck a different chord. I didn't shout. I didn't answer. I got up, went to my office, opened a drawer, and took out a neatly labeled, indexed, and notarized folder. "Look at it," I replied, passing it to him. It had everything. The initial LLC registration in my name, the bank documents demonstrating the staged transfers of $90,000 from my personal accounts, the merchant services agreement in my name, and the lease executed beneath my LLC. Each and every signature, dotted line, every paper trail. Slowly, Jordan flipped through it. Dana peered over his shoulder as this gradual, depressing revelation caused her lips to separate. "You believed me to be a wallet?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "The basis was me. You attempted to find a man who didn't construct any of this to take my place. You want me to mend what you damaged." Now Dana's eyes were fixed on the ground. She whispered, "You have this planned." "No, you did," I said, staring her in the eye. "When you informed me that I wasn't his father, I treated you like a business partner and you reciprocated." After then, it became silent. No more donuts, no more lectures. When they departed, they left the folder on the table. I didn't bother to pick it up at all. I simply sat there breathing for the first time like a guy who had a memory of his identity before he became someone else's fallback option. I gave them the documents the next day. Dana took up residence in the guest room. No more eating meals together. No more promises of a wonderful night. Only the sound of doors closing and quiet. The type of quiet that no longer hurts. It only validates your pre-existing knowledge. I took my time with everything. No shouting, no showmanship. Like a person dragging their arm out of quicksand, I just began to untangle myself. Deliberately and slowly, without creating a scene. I started by getting a divorce. Silently. She did not argue. She was probably too ashamed to attempt. Before the marriage ended, I made care to incorporate a provision safeguarding all financial and company assets. Our joint savings account was likewise frozen by me. It was not drained by her. I believe she was aware that I would bury her in court records and facts if she attempted. Jordan too. In less than a week, he moved out, back to the flat of his actual father. Walk up with 2 bedrooms, no money, no business contacts, 2 mature guys attempting to coexist in an area that was not designed with their egos in mind. I've heard that the store deleted its social media accounts. Kick's vault was tagged as permanently closed on Google Maps. 2 weeks later, the landlord replaced the placard and closed the doors. That $90,000 too. I didn't immediately receive it back. However, this is what I did. Obtain the provider that I put Jordan in touch with. Instead, I made an investment in a tiny logistics firm that is now directly under my control. Something scalable, lean, and unrelated to family strife. My divorce attorney also recommended a certified public accountant who discovered tax deductions I would not have otherwise been aware of. Because of the peace of mind and the unsuccessful company loss, I was able to recoup more than $15,000 from the IRS. Priceless. Since then, Dana has texted me once. Only one message. I'm still baffled by why you did all that. It was something we could have resolved. I didn't respond because you can't truly understand what it means to be a parent or a spouse if you have to ask. Jordan hasn't gotten back to me. According to what I've heard, he's trying to start a new sneaker website while working part-time at an electronics retailer. How much money? Who knows? Perhaps Daniel made the decision to help out at last. Perhaps not. However, I sleep in a peaceful home. My personal area. No cold dinners, no false family guilt, and no falsehoods. Additionally, I framed the original LLC documents and have them on my wall like a prize every morning as I pass the folder. A reminder that loyalty is possible. You are capable of generosity. You are capable of love. But never to those who think you can be replaced. I wasn't his biological father. All right, I am not his stepfather either. Just a man who watched those he trusted and then pieced his life back together. Set everything on fire. That concludes the tale. You must be one of us if you're still here. So feel free. Press the subscribe button. Every day I release more chaos. And believe me, the story for tomorrow. This one is not quite as bad as it is.